Göteborg, the hometown of Volvo, the strong football squad IFK Göteborg, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, and the relatively popular Gothenburg Film Festival with an almost 40 years of tradition, and the Göteborg Book Fair, which is Europe's second largest book fair after, of course, the Frankfurt Book Fair. The internationally renowned pop band Ace of Base also hailed from Gothenburg. So basically, this is the city where culture happens, away from the crowded and stressful environment of the capital city. Very far away, about 500 kilometers away from Stockholm. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode from the 2017 Sweden tour. In this video you'll get to see a bit of Gothenburg, a city that I hope to get back to next year because there is no way you can get a decent flavor of it in just one day of videotaping like I had in this tour. With a population at about 570,000, this city is very similar to my hometown. Lots and lots of cultural events, the old town is decently preserved, and the DDR-style buildings are towards the periphery, while the old traditional buildings were left intact. But while the city feels crowded, and it is, don't get me wrong, most people actually don't live in the city per se, but in the so-called Gothenburg municipality, which covers an immense amount of territory that is technically in Gothenburg, but it is in fact quite far from the city proper. Gothenburg includes, for instance, the Hisingen Island, a place that includes localities that are in fact 70-something kilometers away from the city, but more on that later. The city's name comes from the river that goes through it. It is the fortress from the Göta Älv, Göteborg. Founded by royal charter in 1621, Gothenburg is one of the few places in Sweden about which one can legitimately claim that it has a multicultural tradition. Heck, for the first 40-something years of existence of this town, the Swedes didn't really control the politics of it. It was the Dutch who controlled most of it, and most of the plans of the old town resembled the ones from Jakarta, Indonesia, which at the time was in the process of being built also by the Dutch. And the plans also resemble New Amsterdam, known today as New York. The city was, and still is, highly critical for Sweden's commerce. In the past, it was Sweden's only gateway to the Atlantic and the North Sea, and nowadays the city's port is the largest in the Nordic region. Throughout the time, the city was heavily influenced not just by the Dutch, but also by the Scots and the Germans. Also, the city as a port is the reason why there is a small town in Dawson County, Nebraska, United States called Gothenburg, a town founded by the settlers who embarked on the trip to the United States from here during the Great Swedish Emigration of late 19th century and early 20th century. By the way, the old buildings in Gothenburg, Nebraska look like they've been teleported straight from the Hisingen Island in Göteborg, Sweden. Anyway, the rapid expansion of the city started after the Great Emigration period with the founding in 1907 of Svenska Kullagerfabriken, the SKF, and of course the Volvo Group in 1927. As you can see, at least the central area of the city looks much more European and far less Soviet than Stockholm, and this is due to a period in Swedish architectural history called the National Romantic period, which had its roots in the Romantic Nationalist period that had its peak in mid-19th century in most of Europe. In Sweden, this trend arrived slightly later, but when it did, it marked a revival of building really nice buildings in early 20th century, and at least in Göteborg, many of them still do survive for us to admire them now. Unlike Stockholm, they weren't torn down to make room for brutalist apartment buildings. Now that's not to say you can't find those too, of course, but just like in my hometown, they've constantly been relegated towards the periphery of the city proper, which I guess it's preferable when you don't have a choice in them being built in the first place. Alright, earlier in this video I mentioned something about the municipality and how it includes portions that are really far away from the city proper but are still legally part of the city. One such portion is the Hisingen Island, the fifth largest island in Sweden with a surface of roughly 200 square kilometers. Now, the island contains a few rather unsavory suburbs, but it also includes this portion. And the sunset? You really need to see this. Just witnessing a summer sunset from Hisingen, and it was worth the hassle to take the train from Stockholm till here. Alright, as I said, this is a city I really need to get back to and stick around for at least 3 days so I can get a much better flavor of it and of course much more and better footage from it, which I hope I'll get the chance to do it next year during the election campaign. Now, speaking of the next year, if I get to stick around a little bit more in the city, maybe I'll also get the chance to speak with Alice Teodorescu, which I really wanted to do this year, but time simply didn't allow it. Had I stayed for 2 more days, that probably would have happened too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please tell me in the comments section if you'd like to see more of Gothenburg, because in a few months' time, after I get back from Armenia, I'll start planning things for the next year, and depending on your feedback, I'll reserve more time or less time for this city. And with that said, thank you for watching, thank you for your continuous and generous support, and stay tuned. There's more videos on Sweden coming up in the next several days. Thank you all for your patience, and talk to you all soon on Freedom Alternative.